Well, good evening, everyone. Hopefully, you had a chance to attend the other talk today by Jeff Honda, which is about Commerce 2.0 and new features. In this talk, we'll be going over developing with Commerce. So, as a quick poll for the room, go ahead and raise your hand if you've ever purchased something online. Okay. Now, raise your hand if you've never purchased something online. Raise your hand if you've never done either. Okay, great. Well, it looks like everyone here has obviously used some kind of e-commerce platform or some kind of shopping website. Today, we're really going to be getting into the nitty-gritty of how you can use commerce. Specifically, we'll be going over a few case studies, going over some code examples, and giving you guys the tips and tricks you need to be successful with your customizations with Liferay Commerce. So, without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. So Commerce is a separate application that you deploy into your Liferay environment, whether you're using Community Edition or DXP. And Liferay Commerce comes packaged with everything you need to get started with your e-commerce platform. And while it is a beast of an application in and of itself, and it does provide many of the things you will need, there will be times where, of course, you need to customize some sort of functionality. While it may be intimidating, the good news is that Commerce is built the same way under the hood as Liferay is. So if you're familiar with OSGi components, service builder entities, and MVC commands, then all these things are also applicable in Commerce. And as a result, all of their corresponding extension points are also valuable and applicable in Commerce. So if you've used MVC command overrides before, if you use JSP fragments or service wrappers, these are all things that you'll be able to use in Commerce. And so if you're familiar with those, then extending Commerce should be very straightforward as well.
All right, so you obviously bought something online before. But have you ever seen the inner workings of an online store? Well, right now you'll get a chance to see it behind the scenes as well as how you can build your own online store using Liferay Commerce. So for those of you who are new to Commerce, installing Commerce is just like installing any other LPKG for Marketplace. You just grab the file, deploy to Liferay, restart, and reindex. Pretty simple. We have Commerce Enterprise as well as Commerce Free. And so Commerce, the free version of Commerce you can get from commerce.liferay.dev. And you can also build from source too if you prefer. For the enterprise customers, you just download it from Help Center, and then you'll also need a separate Commerce license, separate from the Liferay license, to go with that. We also offer Liferay that comes with Commerce pre-installed, so you can get that as a Liferay bundle or as a Docker image. And we have two Docker images, one for the free Commerce and the other for the enterprise. How do you start building your store? So you just create a site just as you would in Liferay. It's the same process, so it's what you're already familiar with. And Commerce actually provides two themes out of the box, Minium and Speedwell. So Minium is more for B2B, while Speedwell is for B2C. And what's great is that you can actually use them straight out of the box if you need to get your site up and running the fastest. Otherwise, you can always use them as a base theme for a custom theme. After you've created your site, you'll want to go check out the Commerce configurations under Control Panel and Site Settings. So in here, there are a lot of settings, and there are some required ones that you need to have, as well as some others that are still worth checking into, since there's a lot. Commerce also requires that you have to have certain pages with certain widgets on them in order to work. So for instance, you have to have a cart, you have to have checkout, product details, those kind of things. And so you might be wondering, well, what are the required things that I need to have? Well, Health Check is your friend. So this is a handy tool under the Control Panel. And this one tells you which global settings you need to have in order for Commerce to work. And what's nice is that it provides a fix issue button next to each of these. And when you click on these, then it automatically populates with the values that you need. And you can always go back and tweak which ones you want that applies in your case. There's also a health check under site settings. And this is helpful for the pages that I mentioned earlier, because you have to have certain pages with certain widgets deployed to Commerce. And so if you click the Fix Issue button here, it will automatically create the page and deploy the widgets. So it's kind of like a starting base that you can start with. So health check is a good place to look first. This is a more comprehensive list of Commerce configurations. This is what we had to do when we set up our Commerce sites. And not all of these may apply to you. It kind of just depends on your business requirements. But it's just here for your reference if you want to take a look later at the PDF that they provide later. So a little note on channels. Did you attend Jeff Honda's talk earlier on Commerce 2.0? Okay, cool. So just a recap, and also for those who are not familiar, channels are any place that you can sell your products. So it can be an online marketplace like Google Shopping, or it can be your Liferay Commerce site itself, or it can be a React app. Basically any place where your products are available. And so what you'll want to do when you're setting up your store is you'll want to define a channel for each of those. And when you import your products into the catalog, you'll want to make sure that you associate each product at the product level with channel and catalog. And it's nice because catalogs are actually independent of sites and channels, so it gives it the flexibility so that you can have products associated with several places. Speaking of data import, so how do you import your products into the catalog? Are you familiar with any ETL tools like Talend or MuleSoft? Has anyone had any experience with that? Okay, it looks like a few of you. So what's nice is that with ETL tools, they just make your life easier for importing data and exporting. And Liferay offers two connectors, Talend and MuleSoft. And it's not just a commerce specific thing, you can use it for Liferay DXP as well. So these are some really great tools that you can use. And pictured here are the Liferay components that we offer for your convenience to use in Talend. And so first you have to use a connection to make the connection to Liferay, and then you can use Liferay as a data source or a data destination. In this case, where you're importing products into the catalog, you'll want the Liferay output one, because that is your data destination. And in this one, you will be referencing the Commerce Headless APIs, and those are available on Swagger Hub. So here's an example, for those of you not familiar with Talend, of what your Talend job might look like. So up above, it's establishing the connections to Liferay as well as the external data source. And then below, it is importing and exporting the data. And this particular example is for Liferay integration with Salesforce. So it's really nice because in Liferay, you can actually run, configure, and schedule all the Talend jobs all within Liferay. And what's even better is that when using Talend, you really don't have to write any Java code because it generates it for you when you design the jobs in the UI. So our recommendation to you is use the ETL tools, specifically use Talend and use MuleSoft because we provide the connectors for those. They include all the boilerplate code for scheduling and data integration, as well as data mapping, and so you don't have to handle that all yourself. But what if you're not familiar with Talend or MuleSoft, or you haven't had any experience with that before? Well, that's okay too, because Commerce is basically just like Liferay, in that you can extend it any way that you want. So you can always write your own data integration and using the headless commerce APIs. So our recommendation to you is use whatever you're comfortable with the most, and pick whichever data integration method helps get your project to delivery faster. Next, we'll share a couple case studies on customizing the product details widget. Josh?
Thanks, Jaclyn. So at this point, you have all your data in your commerce website, and you want to customize your user experience and what they'll be seeing. Shown on the screen is the Minium-themed product details widget. Now, this is provided out of the box, and there's no customizations here. And you can just see generally that you'll have the images on the left-hand side, the description, and then down below, you can, of course, select the size option for this t-shirt, small, medium, large. And at the bottom, you can select or input what quantity you want, and then add that product to your shopping cart. Now, of course, when you need to customize this, you would be creating a custom product render. And one of the things that you want to look at is when you're creating this is you want to extend the CP content render interface, as well as provide a view for that. And highlighted here, you can see that we're rendering that in the Vue JSP. And so if you need to, you can create your own custom product render, which will show whatever you would like. If you need to tweak the images, if you need to tweak the text. And so there's a well-documented integration on Commerce's website, commerce.dev, where you can look into more detail. And of course, we'll provide links to all these in the PDF so you can review them later. But out of the box, you're provided with 3 different product renders. There's a simple, a grouped, and a virtual product type. And simple is kind of the main default one. Grouped is when you have a couple of simple products grouped together. And of course, virtual is if you have something like a license or a code that you need to input. And so based on what your requirements are, you can choose your specific product type for that. And each one can be configured differently. So as we saw earlier with the product render, you can create your own custom product render, which you can then select from here, which is the Commerce Details widget's configuration menu. So simply put, if you need a different view than what you saw with the Minium, you can create it, and then you can specify here, based on what product type, what you need to be displaying. So as I mentioned before, you'll need a Java class or a JSP. You can also use soy templates, free marker templates. So it's up to you, but those are kind of the 2 ingredients for creating your own product render. So now, what if you look at this and you say, well, that looks pretty good to me. We don't need to change everything or create our own thing from scratch. How can we tweak just a small piece of this product details widget? And so that brings us to our first case study, which involves one of our clients who wanted to use Commerce as their B2B site for selling other merchandise to wholesalers. While they had no specific requirements for look and feel, one of the things they needed was a options menu where they can specify a quantity for each option and total at the very bottom. So in this case, the first thing to do is obviously understand what Liferay provides out of the box. And so if we go to the configuration for a specific product, we can see the list of different options here. And as you see, there's text field, select from list. But as you look at that list, you'll notice that nothing there really meets our use case. And so this is the first step, which we've passed, and we know we can't get it out of the box. And so we'll have to customize. And so if we want to look at how to customize, let's understand how Liferay is implementing this out of the box. And so here is the Vue JSP for that product details widget we were looking at earlier. And I want to draw your attention to the very center, which calls out DDM form render. Now, if you've used Liferay before, hopefully this name sounds familiar to you. It's used somewhere else. And if you haven't used this or seen this before, then as the name suggests, it is used in the custom forms builder in Liferay. And so in the forms builder, there's actually a grid type which you can use to build out your form and select any number of options. And as you'll see, you can select a radio button under the option there. And while this isn't exactly what we're looking for, it is pretty close, and this actually can be used as a good base for how we can get started. And so here, looking at some of the code for it, you'll see that there's the grid type, and there's a number of different classes that we'll need. And while it might look like a lot, actually many of these are used for the forms builder specifically. And so if we extract out everything we need, we'll come to 3 different classes, a couple of soy files, and this is what your implementation will look like. And as a reminder, of course, all this code has been uploaded to a public GitHub repository, so you can go through, deploy this option in your own commerce environment, play around with it, understand how it works. But basically here, one of the things you need to create is a context contributor, and this class will basically be allowing you to render that option. And so if we need to pass information such as quantity, price, the name of each individual option, that will be handled in this context contributor. And again, that's something used in a lot of different places in Liferay. You might have heard of display context, context contributors. And so hopefully, again, this is something familiar to you guys. One final step you need is to add a configuration file or add a configuration to add our custom table option so that it shows up under the product details configuration. And while you can go to the control panel in the system settings, one thing we'd recommend is going with the config file approach. And what you can do is you'll create a file like shown, and then specify the table option at the bottom. And when you deploy this config file to any Liferay bundle, it will already boot up with this configuration. And so when you're scaling for maybe many different development environments for UAT, QA, we recommend that you don't do all these configurations manually, and you use what Liferay provides, such as configuration files, to speed up that process. And so with all our work, you'll see here what the finished product would look like with that table option specified. And while it looks pretty close to the table we saw, if you notice the bottom, we are still showing the quantity input. And that's something that's no longer necessary, since, of course, we can put that per each option. And so in order to remove that, we can use a JSP fragment and simply remove that quantity input, and then redirect that add to cart button that we are calling, and simply call a MVC resource command that will total the calculation, total the quantity, and then forward that request to the commerce cart. And so just as a summary of everything we did here, we use DDM form fields, we use a configuration file, we use JSP fragments, and MVC resource commands. So as you look at this list, you'll notice here that nothing is specifically related to commerce in this list. If you've extended DXP before, you'll notice these are all things that you've worked with. And we want to reinforce that you can use the same extensions that you know with commerce. And one question you might have in your mind is, if we use a JSP fragment at the very end, why didn't we just start with the JSP fragment in the very beginning? That would have solved all the use of the DDM forms and saved ourselves some trouble. And while you could have gone with that approach, what you would be doing is you would effectively hard code the table option to that product renderer. And so every product that uses that renderer will be forced to only use the table option. If later you decide we need to change that to a select from list, well, that's no longer an option for you. If you find that in an upgrade you do want to change with changing requirements, this product renderer might not render things the same based on how you're extending with the JSP fragment. And of course, when the JSP itself updates, you'll be losing out on a lot of those updates. And so we always recommend that you understand how Liferay works under the hood in order to write your customization and extend Liferay in a way that makes upgrades, maintainability easier in the future, so you can remain flexible when business requirements change. And so this is how you would use something in Liferay to configure a customization in commerce. Next, we're going to talk about how to integrate some kind of third-party tool within commerce as well.
All right, let's talk about chili. So we had a business requirement where we had to integrate with a third-party tool called Chili Publish. And this tool is used so that users could edit product artwork directly from the product details. So I'll do a quick walkthrough of what we did to customize this, and this will just show you how you can definitely integrate with third parties in commerce and product details. So first we had to add a separate custom section in the settings called Chili Settings. And in here we just stored the information to connect to Chili as well as some image render settings. This is an example of a Chili product, and so this was the product artwork template that would be edited. It had a special view for it so that you can edit it directly from here using the button. So how do you create your own custom product type? We had to have our own custom product type so that we knew when to show the special view with the editor or not. And if you remember, Josh mentioned that there were 3 default product types, simple, grouped, and virtual, but you're not limited just to those 3. So you can add as many as you want, and you would do it just like this class. So it just implements the CP type interface, and then there's also some OSGi components as well. And then in the CP content render, which Josh also highlighted earlier, we grab the Chili editor URL, and then we pass it to the view if it's a Chili product type. And then we take that Chili URL and we embed it directly into the product details view. So in here, if you were to use this Chili, you would basically just edit the text, like maybe you would change it to super awesome sale or something else, and then you would just click save within the editor, all right within the product details. And so when you add to cart and then check out, then there was some code that we had that would download the finalized product artwork and save it to a special folder in document library. So this is just a short example of how you can integrate with third parties in product details. Next, Josh will share on how you can customize the payment process and add your own payment methods.
So at this point, your user has completed their checkout process, and they're going to pay for their newly bought items. And so Liferay provides you with a number of different options that you can be using, such as Authorize.net or PayPal or even Money Order. And you can, of course, enable these to make them active or inactive. But ultimately, if you need more options than this, then what is the first step in adding a new payment option? Well, we could look at how each of these are implemented under the hood to understand them. And each one actually is its own OSGi component. And so if we want to add our own payment method, we can look to that as an example, and of course, add a new Java class that will extend or implement the commerce payment method interface. Before we go any further, just to remind you guys, don't be storing any credit card data on your own servers unless you're following PCI standards. We do recommend using a third party to handle that to avoid any mishaps with user privacy and that kind of data. And so here we're looking at an example of the money order payment option. And one of the things you'll notice on the right, we're highlighting the commerce checkout step. And this is something that you need to implement for every checkout step you create, whether it's a payment method, whether it's a shipping address, billing address. And this is detailed with the commerce documentation on how you would do this. But what we want to focus on is the payment method class that we were talking about earlier. And so here's an example of our own custom credit card payment method implementing the interface we mentioned earlier. And there's a number of methods here that you'll need to implement. Many of them are straightforward, such as getting the name or getting the key. One of the ones to pay attention to is the complete payment method. And this class, of course, sets the final status for whatever cart items that you have in order to check out properly. And the other method to look at is the process payment method. And here you would add any of your custom logic. So in this case, for a credit card, we're calculating a surcharge, and then we're storing that later on so that we can reference that in the user's payment history and get a complete total of what they paid for. And so with that, you can create as many other payment methods as you need. And while it did look like a number of classes in the beginning, we wanted to highlight the important ones where you're actually putting that custom logic. And a number of those classes that we saw are simply for it to play nice in the Liferay environment so that you get this ability to configure it from the control panel and that you're able to integrate it properly in the Liferay environment. And so while we don't want you guys to blindly copy code, it's important to understand why classes are doing what they're doing, how things are structured, and that'll help you a lot more when you're deciding how you need to change the implementation. If it's similar to all the other ones already, then you're able to be flexible when you have to upgrade that or there's any kind of changing requirements.
All right, so you learned how you can import products into your catalog and how to customize product details as well as your payment process. And then you just stay on the same version of Commerce forever. Happily ever after, right? Of course not. If you know in your Liferay experience that upgrades are definitely something that you would consider. So how do you upgrade so that you can get that shiny new feature in Commerce? The good news is it's just like upgrading Liferay. The steps are basically the same, and I'm not going to go through them all here. Maybe some of you might have attended Eric Chi's talk earlier on upgrading. But a few things I want to point out is that one thing that's different, obviously, with Liferay and Commerce Upgrade is that you have all the products to consider. So you may have to write, depending on your business requirements, an upgrade process, which Dave covered in his talk as well, to update all the products. So let's say, for instance, a new configuration was added at the product level. So you don't want the default setting set on all your products when you upgrade. So you might want to write an upgrade process step that will update it to the value you want via code. Because you definitely wouldn't want to be going through the UI, setting it in all like hundreds of thousands of products that you might have. That would be a waste of an afternoon. But you definitely want to use upgrade processes because it will do it for you in the code by writing code. Another thing is obviously revisit all your customizations. Commerce rolls out releases like very frequently, and so you'll want to make sure that your customizations still work, or Commerce might even have your customization out of the box since they're always rolling out new features. So that would be helpful for you because then you wouldn't have to maintain that code later. And then if you are building your theme on top of the Minium and Speedwell themes, you'll also want to regression test those too, because those change a lot between versions. So as you've heard, if you went to Eric and Dave Nemiger's talks, as you heard, test in your lower environments before going to prod. Test things that you haven't even changed before. All the edge cases, because Commerce has a lot of changes in each version, and you'll want to make sure that you do a thorough test in your lower environments before promoting that. So unfortunately, we're coming near the end of our talk. It's a really short session. But just remember that actually developing with Commerce is pretty similar to what you already have experience with. So you can use the knowledge that you already have and apply it to Commerce. And so you can extend Commerce just like you can extend Liferay, and keep an eye out for the new features because Commerce is rolling out a lot of really cool stuff.